Welcome to episode 115 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I can't believe the Purge got political on us, Don.
Newsflash, asshole. It was political the whole goddamn time. And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and that's all I got to say.
Now, really, what's up with these people, man? Everywhere I look, I'm seeing the Purge got political, and I'm just like, whoa.
That's like people saying Star Wars got political.
I'm just amazed that this is people's first Purge. That's exciting. Joining us today, we have Josh Ickes. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
It's good to be here, guys.
So why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you feel that the Purge has gotten political? No, I'm kidding.
Well, as you said, I'm Josh Ickes. I also co-host another podcast called Nashville CA, where every week my co-host and I, every other week, we pick two movies and kind of compare and contrast them. We're not normally on hot button issues like The Purge. We've kind of picked stuff all over the place, from Tarkovsky's Stalker to Tremors 2, Poltergeist 3, Annihilation. We kind of dip our toes in a lot of different things, and we're having our first guest coming up soon, so I'm excited about that. Also a filmmaker. I've got a film screening at the Imaginarium Con, which we will all hopefully get to see this next week. And the last feature film that I shot, I believe, is receiving distribution as long as all the deliverables get in on time. So we're kind of in the middle of that frenzy right now, trying to get all that together. Very That's cool. Called The Reenactment, directed by my good friend Andrew Ford. And everybody should look up a trailer. We've got Tony Todd in it, and Megan Duffy, who was in Maniac with Elijah Wood. So good times.
Very nice. We're big Tony Todd fans here. Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
But no, that all sounds great. And yes, I cannot wait. Number one, I can't wait to go back to a con. So this is the week we get to go to Imaginarium in Louisville, Kentucky. And I cannot wait for that. And then we get to see your film as well. So this was all just kind of serendipitous that we worked this out. So
It's great.
Don, I had a question for you about cons really fast, not to just ignore Josh here. This will be my first panel's Friday night, and it'll be exactly 600 days since the last time I did a con, because this is the kind of shit I think about. And I was analyzing, I do this thing after cons. Mm-hmm. Every last day, I stand there and I take it all in, and I tell people, what if it doesn't happen again? And everyone looks at me like I'm insane. And you've even bitched me out for it.
No. I finally
won.
Said you about it.
I finally won, and there were no cons. None. No, but my real question is, what does this mean to you, man, to be able to go back to this lifestyle that we love so much?
I honestly can't tell you yet, because it hasn't happened. And I'm not saying that to doom it. I'm just saying, I don't know, because it's one of those things. I'm not a big Christmas person, as far as oh my God, Christmas is coming. And then, Christmas Day happens and all that joy is there, whatever. And you have all the Christmas movies and things like that. Right. I'm not that kind of person. There's some things that I look forward to, but I think because of the past 2 years, and really that's what it's been for me, as far as things that have been, that I haven't been able to go to, because the last convention I think was LA Comic-Con, the two of us, LA Comic-Con.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago in September. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I don't even see it as it was just COVID, because, there's scheduling and conventions could have happened. I could have gone to some here or there. But so much stuff I've missed out on, as far as going back to China and teaching, the conventions, educational conferences, research conferences, things like that. So I don't know how it's going to feel to be back. but I'm looking forward to it because I'm looking forward to actually talking to people in person about, a book I published, when there was no opportunity to go to a convention and talk to people in person about what I wrote or other than going to, a hotel or somewhere where I was staying and I, happened to give somebody a book as a thank you. And the next day they're like, I read the entire thing. I couldn't put it down. And then you engaged in a conversation about what they liked, what they didn't like. So I think it'd be interesting just to be able to see a bunch of people that have the same purpose, as far as experiencing film, experiencing literature, whatever their fandom is. And, having that sigh of relief of things aren't over with the pandemic, but things are getting to a point where, at least for those of us who are responsible, getting to a point where you're feeling safer in going out and reconnecting with people that you haven't been able to connect with physically and in person. So I'll let you know when we get there, James.
Yeah, that's cool. Josh, did you do many conventions before this, or is this your first? Or
I've done several film festivals kind of in the Southeast region. The last couple years have been a little dry for me because I switched my focus mostly to music videos and my work as a creative director. So this is kind of my first one back in the saddle anyway for the last couple years. So it's just serendipitous that I actually got into a decent fest, and we'll get to see some cool people and some cool panels this time. Normally I'm out just pressing the flesh, but I'm hoping to actually take it in this time.
Very nice. So why don't you tell everybody why we picked The Purge? Obviously, we were kind of already doing it, and then you posted about it, and you were so excited, I was like, we have to bring you in. So what was it about the Forever Purge that got you to this level?
Oh, man. So I went to see this. My friend invited me, my buddy Joe Serra, who also does a podcast. His is mostly mainstream movies and kind of up-to-the-date stuff called Movie Planet Podcast. And he's one of my good movie-going buddies. And it's interesting because we find a lot of common ground, although he sits far to the right of where I do ideologically on a lot of things, because I am very, very far to the left on a lot of things. So even if he is more of a centrist, it winds up being he represents the right. And to sit through this particular film with somebody with an entirely different worldview was kind of fascinating. To hear him kind of scoff at some of the, and it is. The movie is very on the nose and it's preachy, but I happened to be the choir that it was preaching to. Yeah, so I didn't mind it so much. Yep. And I wanted to kind of talk with some other people who I believed would feel the same way as I did, as opposed to Joe, who I love dearly and supports many things that we do in this family. But just an entirely different viewpoint on it.
No, I think that's fascinating. If you feel like bringing up anything that he said along the way, please do, because I don't know, I'd just like to hear it if nothing else. But the big thing for me is anyone who listens to this show knows that I'm psycho left, as I call it, and like this movie was so preachy and so over the top in places that it annoyed me, but it was also my feelings on things. And I read a review that said it's like talking to your stupidest liberal friend. And I was like offended, but I was also like, well, yeah, kind of. But and I mean that with love, because what I mean by that is it's so ground in that it almost lost its point with me a couple times. And so I can't imagine somebody with a completely different viewpoint who doesn't agree with these things, and how that aggressive nature of being too far would affect the ability to have that dialogue. And so along the way, when I say I have a problem with that, that's more what I mean. I feel like, and I'm definitely guilty of this. Anybody who's Facebook friends with me knows this. I attack instead of talking. And I feel like that's what this movie did. And I wish there were a couple points where it was toned down a little so it would have more conversation instead. With that said, Don, What did you think?
Well, before I get to what I think, my question to you would be, what do you mean by conversation as far as how the film could do that?
I guess I just mean opening it up more. Like, so our whole thing with horror is social commentary has always been that horror plants seeds in your head and it leaves these thoughts that it makes you think about later, right? And I feel like this overwaters those seeds and washes them out. Like when it pisses you off or you feel like it's attacking you the entire time, you're not going to keep an open mind enough to leave those seeds in there and think about it. You're going to just fuck the purge, man. They went too far and they did this and that's still going to happen. I'm not saying it won't. I'm saying there's some people out there that can see something and then think about it later, and it can start to affect how they think about things. And for me personally, this went too far with that, and I feel like it destroys that potential. You guys can feel free to disagree. I don't mind.
I can see it because there are definitely people who you're not going to reach no matter what. And in all honesty, I don't think those people were going to see this film anyway, based off of the 4 previous films. Because I think a lot of the people that were to the right or more to the right checked out after the second film. Might have checked out after the third film. I doubt they saw the first Purge, Purge number 4. Because by the time the second film hit, it was clear it was rich against poor, right? The first film, it's rich against rich for the most part, because it's now trying to decide, hey, should we sacrifice this poor guy or this guy we don't know about? We don't know if he's poor, if he's homeless, anything like that. But he's not one of us, and we shouldn't sacrifice that person to these other people because we don't agree with what the purge is, right? Whereas the second film, you really understand that there is an issue of marginalized people being preyed upon. But I think if they didn't check out of the second one, they definitely checked out of the third one because, as far as being on the nose, like the film was the nose at that point because you've got neo-Nazis like full on. I think you and I saw the movie together at the movie theater. And I was like, oh, not a neo-Nazi being a bad guy. What? And I think I even turned to you and I said, I can't tell if this guy's a bad guy because he's got like Aryan Brotherhood stuff and Confederate stuff and Nazi stuff and like all these crazy tats and stuff going. I can't tell if he's the bad guy.
He needed eyeliner like Tobey Maguire had, and then we would have known.
Well, he needed to do a little dance as well. But no, for me, I like this one, and I did not shy away from saying that this is actually my favorite one because I think it was a strong and probably the strongest mix of action and horror that the series has had. But the film itself, for me, my biggest question, I wrote this down first before I even watched before the film even started. I just wrote down, how would this look? Because this movie was delayed. The opening of the movie was delayed. But how would this movie have looked in 2020, right? While we're undergoing the Trump presidency, because there are a lot of comparisons being made, or at least with the rhetoric and things like that throughout the film. How would it look in 2020, and then how can we compare that in a post January 6th, 2021 world?
So much of what I think we see in the movie, like that is text, is what the subtext of a lot of the most political messages we've been getting, and then it became text with things like January 6th. Like it even feels like a year ago it would have been incredibly on the nose, but maybe I wouldn't have quite believed it. I wouldn't have thought there could be something like the Forever Purgers if I hadn't seen the insurrection actually happen. It brings a level of verisimilitude to it that is just, it's a little too much. It's a little too exact. It's a little bit too close to reality for my liking. And I would have rather that it stayed as somebody's fantasy version of it, as kind of a worst case scenario, because we've been shown that we can devolve into the worst case scenario. I mean, we had over the BLM movement here in Nashville, we had people at our state house breaking windows and setting fires to inside the building several months ago when all that was happening. And I think it's I wouldn't have believed it out of my town or out of my country. And, you know, this could have stayed as some sort of phantasmagorical version of it rather than, like I said, too much on the nose. I can see the actual faces behind these masks, and I don't like that.
Right.
I think that sums it up really well. Damn. No, I think that you're actually hitting what I don't like about it. I kind of wonder if this had come out when it was supposed to, would I feel as strongly that it's too preachy? And maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it is because I literally just watched this happen, and I drove by our Capitol here in Phoenix, and I saw all the people outside and how angry they were. And, you know, when the whole voter recount shit started, because my state is utterly fucking insane, you know, I saw the people and I saw the faces and the anger and the let's burn everything down. And you know what? I used to be the guy who wanted to burn everything down and start over, but I feel like at least I knew we needed a plan for what would happen after. And I feel like these people don't have a plan at all. And that scares me more than anything. Everything is just reactional. And I think that fits into the Purge really fucking well. The Purge is all about reactional. You go back to the first Purge, the movie, The First Purge, the fourth movie. I hate the fucking name, by the way. But you look at how the Purge wasn't starting. People were having sex on cars and doing drugs and throwing block parties. And that was their retaliation. That's how they wanted to get their anger out and their whatever. They just wanted to have some fun and blow off steam. And then the founding father people brought in people to start the war. And after that, once you set the bar for that being the Purge, that's what the Purge becomes. And people have a whole year to plan how to kill people. Like, just imagine that. They're just sitting around for a whole year planning how to shoot people. Oh, wait, no, that's reality. Back to the Purge. This is so, it becomes just reactionary. It's the bar is murder. So then it becomes, what can we do that's interesting with that? And how big can we make it? And when these movies came out, it did feel far-fetched. And now today, I'm watching the Forever Purge and I'm like, I don't know, man, that looks like where we're heading. And it's all real now. So back to my original point, too long didn't read. I agree. Maybe if I had saw this when it came out or when it was supposed to come out, maybe I wouldn't feel it's as preachy.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. You bring up several good points. And I think one of the things that people really need to think about, whether we're talking about the Purge or all these yahoos, because I'm going to try and be a good boy today. All these individuals who stormed the Capitol or stormed their respective state capitals or protested outside, they are, as Heath Ledger's Joker would say, I'm just a dog who's chasing a car, and once I catch it, I don't know what to do with it. I don't have a plan. And that's what I saw with them. And the same thing even when it comes to the Purge, right? I've seen this, as an historian, I've seen this laid out so many times. It doesn't matter what society is. There's always this idea of, if we just get rid of X, everything will be okay. And so one of the things that's part of the Forever Purge are all these people who say, like, oh, we're gonna purify America. We're gonna make purebred Americans, or only pure Americans can stay. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, ain't that a bitch? How the fuck do you decide what a real American is? Because that's some shit I've heard since I was a kid, as far as this whole idea of real Americans. But just the idea that you're going to get rid of these people and things are going to get better. I mean, you assume things are going to get better. And when that's not the case, like, you're going to go ahead and kill, because this is one of those things that was part of things like neo-Nazi literature, like the Turner Diaries, which was, if we start a race war and kill all of the others, everything will be good for us. I'm one of those people who would say complete horseshit. That's not the way the world works. That's not the way the societies work. Genocide does not make anything better. Well, even look at it this way, because there's an argument that gets brought up in the film, and there's an argument politically that gets brought up about the wall, right? The whole rhetoric about a wall, whether it's in the film or whether it's used in politics, it's all about keeping undesirables out. You know, and those undesirables are not Western Europeans. Those undesirables at one point were Chinese, and another part, they are Latin Americans. To where we're talking about, even in politics itself, the biggest fear that people I've dealt with on the right, not all of them, just some, is that America is getting browner. Or when I almost said Luke Evans, but the Dylan's character makes that statement about, I don't know if I want my child, I don't know if I want Spanish being spoken around my child, because, you know, there's this idea that, you know, his sister or one of the other relatives has a Mexican nanny, a Spanish speaking nanny, and he doesn't want that child speaking Spanish, which again, it just sounds like so ridiculous. Why? You're living in Texas. You might want to learn a little bit, because it's part of the culture. It's part of all the cultures that are mixing there.
Well, that's his problem right there. As a good businessman, you would want to speak the language to know what your employees are saying, but that's me. Josh, what do you have to add to that?
I think it's interesting. This was my second Purge movie. I dipped out after the first one, because the marketing behind it had been about the Purge itself, and about like, there's this idea that crime is legal for 12 hours and you can do whatever. And then the film that I saw was just a straightforward home invasion thriller.
Yes.
And I really wanted them to do something more with that idea. At the time, you know, I remember suggesting to my friends that it could be a really good comic book series, something long form where you can get into different types of crimes. I want to see someone pulling a heist that, you know, has moments to go before the sirens are going off, and they've got their team assembled, and then at the end it's a fight against the clock to get out so you can do it, you know, legally, quote unquote.
That would be my favorite Purge instantly. I'm a huge heist fan. So no, Don and I always talk about that, not to cut you off, but we always say I would be trying to hack a bank. I wouldn't be out murdering people.
Right, exactly. And there's all kinds of other things that can happen. So for me, like, when I first saw the trailers for this one, and even in the trailers, you can tell, because, you know, they drop the line, does this translate as the one of our heroes executes one of the bad guys? Like, you kind of know what you're getting into. So I knew that it was like an expanded world, and that they had definitely used this idea for something more specific and political than just, you know, the mild class discussion that the first one brought up. And this one touches on both like race and class a little bit, by the first purgers that get to the ranch, which I thought was interesting. And I think they could have folded more of that discussion in, instead of just hammering home on the one point of, you know, not all immigrants are bad, basically, repeatedly.
Right. Yeah, and I think that the ranch is one of the strongest parts of this film. So I would have liked to see not even necessarily more of that ranch, but more things like that. But really fast, you just brought up a fascinating point that I hadn't considered. I just take into account that everyone eats every Purge movie like I do. And you just said you only watched the first one. And if you only watched the first one and then jumped to this, it might feel like the Purge got political. Like you might have just solved my problem with everything I'm reading online. You know, if you actually watched the others, I mean, the third one's called Election Year. We can't get more political than Election Year, you know, that sort of thing. But no, that's a fascinating point, because people do in most series watch the first one and maybe the second, but they don't sit and watch all five. So you might have just made me think about this differently.
Well, and I only know one person who has gone on to watch the television show. Have either one of you guys dipped into that at all?
I started the first season and then I never went back to it because I just planned. I'm like, I'm just going to binge it. And second season came out and the same thing. I was like, I'll watch it all together. And I keep forgetting to go back to it.
I just don't have time, so I never do.
Yeah, same here. My good friend Andrew Ford, also his plan was to go through the entire series before he watches the new one, so he kind of missed out on opening day discussions. But he said in the second season, they do expand the world and kind of the crimes that are happening in really interesting ways, and that sounds fascinating. And it is kind of disappointing then that it didn't get to continue.
Mm.
I always wondered what the other countries think. Like what is England doing during the purge? Are they watching it on TV, or are they just like stupid fucking Americans? You know, like,
oh, look at the colonials. Look at them. They're so cute.
It's like the way Americans watch coronations and shit, but they're watching the purge.
Well, I don't think they would see any difference. They would look at the purge and like,
right?
Okay,
that's
what is
American
Tuesday
news.
There?
That's a really good point. If any of our foreign listeners want to write me and tell me what you think would happen during it, I would love to hear it. Yeah, but going back to what you were saying about the ranch versus like how it became not all immigrants are bad. Man, there's so much that could have been done with the different cities and stuff, and just like. Even when they're in the city later and they're looking for the roses so that they can find their way, which we'll probably explain in a minute. Like, I just felt like it's so glossed over. Like, it hit these parts where it just feels like a Michael Bay action film and I can't tell what the hell's going on, but there's no story there. And there's a little bit, but I want the story of what's happening in the city and how it affects each other. Like that's more fascinating to me. So I don't know.
Well, how would it work for you? I mean, as far as like, what would you be looking for, or what do you feel like was missing?
I don't connect to anybody, so I don't give a shit when they die. That's
Okay.
number one for me. Number two is just some of it is so fast that I don't care. Like I literally phase out. You know, I don't do well with action films anyway, but like I'm just like, okay, 900 people are shooting at each other. What the fuck ever? Like I don't even care at this point. I don't know. I would just like to connect with somebody. Like I would like to know more about the older Mexican woman who was clearly in charge when they were leaving at the end there.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could have done a whole story arc with her and how she's getting people together and how they have a plan out of this or just like what her story is. And that would be way better to me. Like we see the First Nations guy on TV a couple times, but then he's important for a little bit and then he's not. Like none of it added up to me. Like if he's important enough to get them out of there, like he should probably be in charge during the final battle instead of the white cowboy guy. And I don't know, like I just felt like it was a missed opportunity to make me care about any of these characters because we were so much more obsessed with constantly telling me how good the immigrants are.
Well, you know, that's I guess a conversation you and I had through text where I jokingly said, but then you agreed with. So I guess it was half joking. The Dylan character, at least Dylan's somewhat story arc that they try to create with him, it's about making the white audience comfortable, right? You can't have, you know, this guy who's the cowboy, his pregnant wife who, you know, that's another variable I'm glad that they added in. Because I've always questioned what happens to people who have medical conditions who are pregnant. Like, how the fuck do you just guarantee, like, I don't have to worry about anything because I'll be pregnant during the purge and I'll be locked down, I'll be safe. But just the idea that you couldn't have Tenoch Huerta's character. Oh gosh, now I forgot his name. Juan, Jesus. So you have Juan and you have Adela that are coming from Mexico, resettle in the United States. You have the indigenous man's name was Chiago. You have Chiago and his people on the reservation on their land. And I think if you give them the opportunity to I don't know, carry more of the story or have more story elevated about themselves, being elevated to elevate them. I think, and this is just me looking at this and look at the history of film, you have an audience in a lot of cases that's going to look at it as, well, this is even more preachy because, okay, the brown people and the red people and the black people and the yellow people saved the day, as
Good.
opposed to I'm just saying, as opposed to, hey, they all worked together and got past this. I'll be honest. I was waiting. I didn't think Chiago was going to do what he did in the film, but I was glad to see that action take place, as well as I was glad to see people like Juan's character and Adela's character fighting their way through all of this bullshit.
Josh, you have anything to say before I go on a rant about the white boy taking charge?
There you go. I'm setting you up, man. Spike it.
I think it would have been interesting. The first villain character that we get at the ranch, I don't remember what his name was. We only got a couple scenes with him earlier. Yeah. And it seemed like he was against everybody. He was resentful of all the other characters a little bit. Yeah. But the little speech that he gives that talks about class and about how, the rich get rich off the back of the poor. And that seemed to me to be leading down a road kind of like Killmonger from Black Panther, right? Like where you make a character, a villain, quote unquote, who actually is really sympathetic in his cause. Mm-hmm. And that you really, he is addressing things that do need to be talked about. I think to stick with that character or that theme would have introduced some more complexity into this story that would have been, because everybody's an underclass to the rich. That's the big dark secret, right? Like, it doesn't matter what your skin color is, that top 2% takes it all from anybody. And they might dislike some more than others, but really they kind of don't care about anybody else except for themselves. And he was espousing that viewpoint, and I feel like that would have made for a richer text. But him and his group, which there had to be some sort of planning. There had to be some sort of, call to arms and call to action beforehand. They had patches made up for crying out loud.
Right.
These people had flags. They were ready to do this all across the country. So there had to be some meetings, like the other people with his viewpoint, and not just the racists wanting to cleanse the land of anybody who isn't lily white.
There was this somewhat loose-knit band of forever purgers where I just saw it as the same as QAnon, where, they had been operating in plain sight, but no one really thought much about them. It is, kind of like QAnon. We didn't really think about them until probably the last couple of years.
Yeah, they mentioned their social media pages a couple times and stuff like that. So this has clearly been going on. But, I think that's another thing that would be really good to explore. Like you have the worker you were talking about who does the class speech, and then you have the white supremacist group, and you have whatever else, and you have kids who would be out doing this just because they can. And I think that's an interesting thing, is these people that are all out doing these things, not taking into account how dangerous it is to be out there because of the views of the other people out there. Mm-hmm. Like that's fascinating to me. But going back to the guy that cuts the class speech, I think that your Killmonger reference is right on point. 100%. Because the strongest movie I think you could get out of this is those two guys being friends before this and then taking different routes to survive the purge and constantly running into each other and like tension building between them until a final blowout. That's the fucking movie I want to see. And you can still preach to me that not all immigrants are the same, because you're literally showing me 2 points. And I don't need Dylan Tucker, whose name is said too many times in this fucking film. I don't need Dylan Tucker to whitewash the fucking film for me and take over everything to be a man. So I do feel like part of my problem with this first group at the ranch, though, is it almost sets up like the wrong angle. Like if the whole theme of the film is going to be the good immigrants, you can't start it by making the white people completely sympathetic and making them the bad guys. Like that automatically made the tone weird to me. And I don't know what to do with that.
You mean as far as like Dylan Tucker being an asshole, or are you talking about like the other ranch
his
hand?
Dad? His dad is like the most sympathetic fucking dude for a half a second.
Okay. You know, he's the best liberal ranch owner. He practically has a halo around him for a little bit.
He does. He is the best person that's ever walked the planet. But I mean, that's probably what happens. You see his genes kick in later, and Dylan Tucker becomes a good guy, able to take over everything. So, no, I don't know. It just makes the tone off for me the whole time. Like it didn't need to happen. Like he could have been an asshole and still been sympathetic. Like this taking it to another level and then making the Purgers completely evil for killing him ruined that part for me, because I need this to all be questionable. I need the lines to be so fucking thin between everybody that you have no idea what you would do in this situation. That's me. I don't know.
No, I get you on that one. I definitely understand it. Is even when the purge night takes place, right? Dylan grabs the gun out of his gun locker or whatever it is.
Thank God he leaves that open.
Yeah. There's this nice diversion that takes place where you honestly think something is happening that night. And the way that Dylan is interacting with people like Juan and TT and the other ranch hands, you get this sense that, one, because he's been emasculated, at least in his estimation, he's been emasculated because Juan is so much better at breaking a horse than he is. And he's supposed to be naturally good at this because his family's been ranching for so long. But how dare this Mexican ranch hand show up who barely speaks English, is so good with the horse. So he's been emasculated. And you immediately think, based off of the previous movies, that's all he needs as far as an audience to see. That's all you need as an audience to see with him, to say like, oh shit, he's going to do something tonight. And he grabs the gun. I'm thinking like, okay, well, because his dad said, some things that might not have sit well with him. And then, he doesn't necessarily like Juan. Okay, he's going to take this opportunity to kill his dad and take over the ranch. I like that there was that diversion or that red herring that was there in the storyline to at least for me, to make me think, okay, this guy's going to be an asshole and is going to go a different route. You don't get that. And you get this idea of, he may have been grabbing the gun to protect his family, but then still pissed off about everything that's going on and thinking about how to deal with it down the line. But you do this, the same thing is done by, I think the ranch hand's name is like Kirk or something. When Kirk shows up with all those other guys in their gear to give his speech and to talk about who he is and what America really is and the American dream and all this other stuff, you start to think, oh, this is going to be people that are out on their own to continue the purge because they didn't get to kill, or they didn't get to feel everything they wanted to feel that night. And it's just going to keep going on because you can't satiate people's rage, right? Which goes into when the media is covering this, saying, because of political policy, domestic policy, economic issues, whatever, people brought the new founding fathers back into power. And the new founding fathers said, hey, we're going to continue the purge. You may feel kind of like people did with COVID, like, oh man, I was locked up in the house. Now I got to go out here and I got to do crazy shit. Oh, I never had a drink of alcohol, but you know what? Tonight I'm going to do cocaine. That whole idea of, I'm not going to start normally. I'm just going to go to the extreme with whatever this is.
Josh, do you have anything to add to that?
I do think the idea that there's like the different factions. I mean, if you look at the real life examples that we've talked about, there are young kids who get into these movements because they think it's funny. Right. They're not so much taking it seriously. They think it's a joke. And I know, when I was younger, there were I read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And if there had been a group of people who were like talking about stuff like that, I would have hung around them. Yep. And I probably would have soaked up some of their rhetoric, and I would have slowly started believing what they're believing. And in that's how you get indoctrinated to these things, is little by little. And then other people, like you were saying, just they're going to jump off the deep end. They see it as their chance to wild out and have a completely different life for 12 hours. And I think seeing any one of those factions, like somebody on the side of the what do they call it, Purge Purification Force, if we would have gotten to know any of those characters beyond kind of the caricature-ish way that we do, that to see if there's any complexity there, to see that somebody maybe got into it for the lulz and is now realizing that they're actually shooting human beings and freaks the fuck out. I think things like that would be interesting to see from a storytelling perspective, and would help tone down the preachiness of the overall thing, and kind of, I feel like it'd be playing a little more both sides, and showing you the actual people exist on the other side, as opposed to just vilifying everybody who exists in that range. And I feel like they kind of shut it down. There is no gray in this world. It's either the whitest of white or the blackest of black. And I think it could have been interesting to see some more of those real world examples. I mean, I know that I've read think pieces on intelligent people who've gotten sucked into these cults and different conspiracy theories slowly but surely. And I think something like that could have been really interesting and would have helped me, feel more comfortable in this world, as opposed to, even though, like I said, I'm on the side they're preaching to, I felt that it was too much sometimes.
Well,
I like that.
I was going to say, you bring up a great point, because I think of one of the previous ones, there's been that debate of people who didn't want to purge, right? But they didn't purge. They didn't go out seeking to purge. But you have those moments where people did it and realized that was wrong in the previous films, right? But then you also had people who resisted it and then found themselves in a situation like, shit, I got to kill somebody to get out of this, or I have to do something. So yeah, I think that's something they could have added back into this one. You're right.
Well, I think it's, and correct me, you'll probably know, Don, but I think it's 2 where the guy is defending his store. And he knows that it'll get destroyed during the purge. So he literally just sits in his store with a gun and waits, and then fights people that come in, and then, bad shit happens from there. But
well, that would be Purge 3 election year, and that
is that election year.
That's election year, because the girls come in playing Party in the USA.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Well, election year is my favorite, but I haven't seen it in a while. So,
but
anyway.
again, it's the necessity of him going, because his insurance went up too much.
Yep.
So it's he and his employee. Yeah, they spend the night, because he even says, like, hey, I'm used to this stuff. I grew up in Juarez. Like, it was like this every night. So he looks at it as, this is my friend. I wouldn't be out here purging. I'm going to help my boss and my friend, 1, to make sure he's safe, and then 2, to make sure he doesn't lose his business. And I guess you could also say, so I still have a fucking job tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, that's big. Let's talk about jobs while we're on that. We have I assume it's a meat packing plant, right?
Yes.
In this one. And that moment where Adele walks in the day after the purge and she says, "Where is everybody?" I literally, in the theater, went, "Where the fuck do you think they are?"
Thank you.
Like, like, number one, you're from Mexico and keep talking about how much it's like this all the time. I don't feel like you'd be that caught off guard. But with that said, I think that's a super powerful moment, because it shows these are people that aren't in the rich neighborhood with Ethan Hawke with his big steel doors that close all the windows and shit. And Dylan Tucker has that as well. Like, these are people that are out in the shit. So no, most of your workforce isn't coming in on Monday.
But wait, there's also, you also have to consider this. this is their first purge where Adela and Juan are there. So they may have seen it from a distance. They may not have seen it from a distance. They may have only seen like little bits and pieces. So for her to go through the first one, I mean, they were in the shelter, getting their, being protected that night. And, if it's your first time and you didn't have an incident, your first thing is, and you saw a lot of the people that you work with at that shelter, you would have thought, you would have probably assumed the same thing. Like, where the fuck is her? This is weird. I'm sorry, Josh, I think I cut you off.
I was just going to say that I did think that was an actual kind of emotionally effective moment that worked. Just seeing that place so sparse as opposed to the other time we had been through the meatpacking plant, and to see the reaction on her face. And I think that whatever the scripting makes them do, a lot of the actors in this acquitted themselves really nicely. I feel like there was a lot of people kind of swinging for the fences as far as their performances went.
Oh, yeah. No, the performances in this are just great. I mean, you bring up another interesting point, though, Don, that it is people's first purge. So some of these people didn't come back because they have no experience with the purge.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also the first purge in years. So I can't remember if they gave how much time had passed since the end of the purge itself, the previous purges, and the NFFA were out of power, and then how long it took for them to bring the purge back. So, I mean, it could have been 5 years. It could have been 10 years. So you've got a good number of people, even if they had been living in Mexico. I'm sorry, even if they hadn't been living in Mexico, but they were living in this area, this still would have been their first experience of like, oh shit, I forgot that things like really went down, or, oh, I remember it used to be really bad. So I'm going to make sure that my family's safe, I'm safe, a group of us are going to get together and protect each other. Nothing happened. Oh, great. This is awesome. Nothing bad happened like the last purge. And in all honesty, with the purge that happened that night, it may not have been as bad as so many previous purges. It may just been, maybe the forever purgers people were like, well, shit, we're not going to do anything crazy. We're going to wait for everybody to feel like they're safe. And then we're going to start purging the next day because everyone will be out, as opposed to everyone who doesn't want to purge, or everybody who's seeking safety is going to lock themselves away. Which, again, may have been part of their strategy. You think you're safe. You're outside of your gates. You're outside of your walls. Now we get to have our fun.
So I had a question about the... you said in the first purge that they have to kind of entice the people or introduce some bad actors to actually get the purge going in a meaningful way. What do you think about the fact that it gets out of control to the point where the National Guard has to pull out from these cities? Like the government is the one that started this domino falling, and then they're ultimately the ones that can't contain it. Was there a message there about what we've been going through?
I mean, I feel like this is one of those things that feels different than it would have if it had come out on time, because I literally saw people refuse to bring the National Guard in. So it doesn't feel weird to me that they would pull them out. Like they want to keep their soldiers alive for other wars, right? Like they don't want to waste the resources when you'll kill each other. So I feel like that's one of those things that Demonico accidentally predicted instead of, but it resonates really fucking hard with me, because I'm watching it going, yep, that's exactly what we did. And I think that also goes back to this. I know we're kind of ruining the third movie for you, Josh, but the purge ends. Like the senator comes to power. Her first thing is going to be putting an end to the purge, because apparently senators have infinite power in Purge World, and she can just do that. And but
no, she becomes president, James.
Oh, she does, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She was already a senator.
She was a senator, and that was part of her platform, was ending the purge.
All right, that makes way more sense to me. It's been a couple of years since I've seen it. Anyway, but she puts an end to it. The fact that it comes back, I think if this movie came out now, if they were filming this now and putting it together, there would be a real emphasis on that, on how it came back and how voters wanted it back. And they pushed for this basically, the same way that, certain people aren't in power right now, but they will be again, and they'll have somebody competent who doesn't ruin their shit every 2 seconds. I think that there would be a real focus on that. And I feel like this would absolutely happen. I don't even know that we would get to the point where we would have somebody who could stop it. But if we did, I absolutely believe we would restart it again.
Well, I think nostalgia has a lot to do with this, too. I mean, nostalgia with political alliances, allegiances, ideologies, right? Because you see how without saying it, they get into this moment where you feel as though the American people were like, remember the good old days under the NFFA? We got to do to the point they only paid attention to the cool catchphrases, the things that took place under them, where they could argue like, well, unemployment was virtually gone. I mean, unemployment didn't exist under us. The economy was doing great. It was doing this. But even in those films where
there's still always a lot of jobs right after the purge.
Yeah, strangely enough, a lot of cleaning crews needed. But you see, even in the previous films, aside from the first purge, number 4, you see how there is this moment where people start to consider this shit ain't good. This isn't right. Like, okay, well, yeah, you can say low unemployment, but then you see that one nurse that's working like 2 shifts, and the father volunteers himself to go get killed by a rich family because they can't afford to take care of him. So even though the NFFA is going around saying the economy is strong and employment is high and you don't need anything in this country, you still see the poor, the destitute, the marginalized that are suffering in this. So it's kind of like a lot of us, not myself, a lot of us look back on the 80s and say, oh my God, it was so great then. And all we're talking about is the music and the clothing. Well, not so much the clothing. The music and the pop culture.
White people are definitely talking about the clothing.
Okay. But we're not talking about, unemployment. We're not talking about the way that people's economic the tax base was compromised. We're not talking about, the drug crisis. We're not talking about AIDS, any of those things. But we'll quickly talk about, oh man, remember when Ronald Reagan said X? And it was the same thing in the 1980s. We fantasized about the 1950s. I love Back to the Future. I love it. If I were to remake it, it's going to be a fucking horror movie because it's going to involve going back into the 50s, because I love how Marty goes in. Marty has full access to everything when he goes back into the 50s because of his privilege of being a white male, right? If he happened to be black, brown, or Asian in that same time period, he's going to run into some problems. So the way that we remember things and romanticize them helps to create a bigger problem. And that's what happens here in this film, or at least from my estimation, that's what happens with the people in this film where, man, the NFFA, everything was so great under them. Let's bring them back. And then, after the first purge, you're like, oh, we fucked up. We shouldn't have voted them back in. This was a bad idea. What do you guys think about it?
I think I want to see this horror film. I want to see a black kid hanging out with Doc Brown. Anyway, well, we're going to have to change Doc Brown's name or else it's going to get weird. All right. So I couldn't resist that one. Josh, what do you want to add to that?
I think it is interesting. Like when people pine for the good old days, it's not so much that they were better. It's that I was comfortable and had something in front of me at that point. I didn't know that this bad shit was going to happen, basically. And there's all kinds of personal things that I think people idolize when they're younger and then find out aren't true or are a lot tougher to achieve as you get older. And those things fall by the wayside. And so a lot of that, even though they're voting politically for it, it's based on their personal experiences. It's based on their gut telling them that, oh, when I was 12, the world was great. When I was a kid, when I was in my 20s, there was everything, there was all kinds of possibilities, as opposed to now you're in your 40s or 50s and you have a day job and things are what they are. Yeah. And to try to get back to that, but it's that in and of itself is cyclical. I mean, in the 70s, you had American Graffiti looking back at the 50s. And in the 80s, we had, the Happy Days and all the doo-wop type restaurants and the resurgence of that. In the 90s, we had that 70s show and Dazed and Confused. It's like there's always that romanticizing of the past. And it can get real dangerous when someone starts looking at Germany in the 30s and going, man, those trains, they ran on time. We really should get back to that without thinking about what the rest of that entails. And I feel like in the real world, that's a lot of what people do. You kind of, everything else be damned, I want my trains to run on time. If that means that we kind of have to have a dictatorship, well, so be it. The other things, it doesn't really affect me. Right. I'm sure the actual practices of communism seem pretty great for the guys who don't have to stand in line. That's, any kind of cult is awesome for the people at the top. It always works that way, and you would pine to get back to it. And I think it's dangerous, and this shows a little bit how, that effect kind of plays out in the real world, definitely amplified. But I think that it is an interesting point. But another thing that I wish they maybe would have expanded on.
There's a meme that I don't remember clearly, so I'm going to mess it up completely. But it really goes into how you think that things were better in the 80s or when you were growing up, but you don't take into account that you were in a community surrounded by people that looked like you. You had 2 channels or 3 channels, so you didn't have all these different viewpoints. You just had people like you feeding you the news. And I was looking at that, and that day I just remember like sitting there, and it really put into perspective like why my mom, for instance, let's just call her an extreme racist. Anyway, we don't get along, so I can take shots like that. She doesn't listen to my show.
I was going to say, she doesn't listen. You're fine.
So, but no, it really puts into perspective like her worldview to me, because I don't take into account that I have the internet and I have experience traveling places and I have all these different voices being able to tell me their story. Whereas she's very comfortable in that 1960s feed me things that look like me kind of phase, Right. And that meme really put that into perspective for me, because I hadn't thought about how controlled the media was. I'm not saying it was purposely controlled. I'm saying like you didn't have access to other shit, You had a local newspaper. You had these couple channels, that kind of stuff. And I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Well, that also lends itself to why, the forever purgers, the ones who want to cleanse, right? They would strike me as the people that we see on social media, sometimes in our own personal lives, that don't like the media that they're consuming anymore, right? Because there are too many people of whatever background, whatever persuasion, orientation, gender identity, whatever, that they don't like because they weren't exposed to it as quote unquote normal. Like whether it's, an interracial relationship or a same-sex couple or a transgender woman, a transgender man, right? So this whole idea of, I don't like what America has become because it's not what I recognize. So I need to do something about it and get rid of those impure people, those people who aren't part of my America. And do things like passing laws to restrict their voter access, passing laws to restrict their participation in various extracurricular activities, basically to further marginalize them so I don't have to see them or deal with them on a daily basis. Whereas in the film, you go even further, and it's like, well, really don't want to deal with you on a daily basis. I want to cut you up. I want to maim you. I want to mutilate you. I want you dead, because the longer you're here, the longer you're a threat to not just my worldview, but who I am. And I believe the writers, the producers, and even the actors, for that matter, all did a great job of capturing that without having to fully say it. As far as the rationale for these forever purgers getting behind this purification, and then not noticing the irony of what the fuck they were saying. this idea of American purity. I mean, the only American purity I believe in is the American Purity and Standards Act. Don't put any poison in my gin and tonic, please.
So I had a question. I don't know if you guys have seen or have talked about the film The Hunt.
We have
not yet.
Okay, have you not seen it either?
I've seen it.
No. I think okay. I didn't see it because when it got pushed back, it was one of those things where I'll get to it, and I keep finding time that doesn't exist to.
Right. Yes. That was my initial feeling walking out of this, is that it was the liberal version of that, or perhaps kind of a response to it. And I didn't know if either one of you had any kind of thoughts or compare and contrast films like that, because it does seem like liberal Hollywood gets to make more liberal screeds than conservative ones. Mm-hmm. I will agree that there's probably more artists are liberal. It just happens that way. People with open minds have open minds. It turns out people who can empathize with other people and do so for a living tend to see other people as human and don't denigrate them in the ways that a lot of conservatives would like to do. So, I just thought it was kind of an interesting counterpoint film to that one.
So I would actually argue that it happened the opposite direction. I would say that The Hunt was more of a response to the other Purge films. If we were going to, I'm not saying it actually is, but if we were going this route. And what I mean by that is there were already, I think all 4 Purges were out at that point. Mm-hmm. And it's a similar story in many aspects, but like you said, it's definitely more on the other side of this. And yet there's still some very liberal viewpoints in it, and a lot of class stuff and different stuff like that. But I do feel these would be a great double feature. This one in particular, Forever Purge, would be a great double feature with The Hunt. And I don't know. It's hard to talk about it because I haven't seen it in probably a year, but my feelings as I recall it, it didn't feel as preachy to me. And I feel like it did a better job of walking the line between the two, even though it was clearly more right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I've seen and heard arguments that, for against both sides, I guess, for The Hunt, with conservatives saying that it's too liberal. I mean, Trump tweeted that it was liberal violence fantasy.
Sure, but Trump didn't see it.
No, and he didn't actually name the film, but everyone knew what he was talking about. I can't imagine that dude actually sitting down and enjoying a movie, just as a person.
He likes Evita. I know that. So, so fucking strange.
God, that's weird. That is weird.
He lists it as one of his favorite movies. I haven't gotten to take shots at Trump on this show in a while, so I really had to throw that in. Because one of my favorite moments was when he came back from the hospital with COVID, and he was on the balcony, and it looked straight out of Evita. And it's so fucking great. So I made a meme that said, "Don't cry for me, Orange Team." Anyway.
Nice.
So
this is why you're more popular on social media than I am.
I am not.
Things like
People
that.
Just block me. They're like, God, I hate this fucking dude. He can't make up his mind if he's making dad jokes or if he's pissed off at people.
There's room for both.
Exactly. Let's talk about the actual film in a couple spots here for a minute. I want to talk about the beginning for sure, because I really appreciated how they showed, and it's still very toned down, but how they showed the journey to get to America. Like
Yes.
you see the land around them and it just stretches forever as they're trying to cross it. And they have this one thing of water. Maybe they have more in the backpack. I'm not sure. But like you can see the toll it's already taking. And then they reach these people where they're handing over money to use the tunnel system. And you just get that absolute fear of, are they going to take the money and just slaughter these people?
Right.
Like clearly they're not, because we know who the heroes are, but like that tension is still there. And you can just sort of imagine that fear that must take place even when you have to go to somebody to get this, right? And then they go down the ladder into the tunnel area and the top closes. And there's just this moment of like, for me, I was like, how long have these people been down here waiting? Like how often do these walks through here happen, you know?
Right.
And I don't know. It was all just very strange to me. And then, it reaches the end. They get out of the tunnel and the kid hands them this card. And he says something to the effect of, if you're ever in trouble, follow the roses.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like that moment. They get out of the tunnel. They're completely alone again. And that's horror to me. Like I talk about how horror is individualized, right? I cannot imagine what would happen to me if you just dropped me off in a new country.
Oh, no. No, that is horrifying. We recently went on a vacation to San Francisco, and just walking through the different areas down there, and we've never been there, that in and of itself was disorienting enough that things are closed at weird times. We're not going to starve because we are in America and we can call Uber Eats if we really had to. But the feeling of displacement that even a change that minor brings on is amazing if you look at it. So I can't imagine walking into an entirely new country where you're not wanted and not supposed to be, and you have to sneak around to gather enough supplies to live off of. That's insane.
Yeah, I taught ESL in the summer. This is years ago.
Mm-hmm.
A good number of the kids were undocumented, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the policy, at least with schools, was it didn't matter if kids were documented or undocumented, they were going to go to school. And these kids, several of them, talked about the shit they had to go through. We just sat there and some who had broken English, some who were getting better with their English, were explaining things. And I just sat there, I'm like, no one needs to fucking complain about these kids, their parents, anybody else coming to this country, because the shit that they went through to get here it's a harrowing journey. And it's one of those things, especially in Arizona at the time, there's SB 1070. So these kids were having to worry about, I had a kid, and she actually wasn't in my ESL. She was in my standard history course. And she pulled me aside because, one, she was undocumented and SB 1070 had just happened. And from talking to my kids and getting to know them, they got the understanding, like the teachers they could trust and they could talk to. So she came to me and she said, Mr. G, if SB 1070 passes, does that mean like immigration is going to come to the school and come get me? We never had a discussion as to her legal status or anything like that, but she felt comfortable telling me that. And, I put two and two together. I'm like, okay, well, she's undocumented. And I told her, I was like, no, that shit's not going to happen. Don't worry about, that's not going to happen here. And she's like, well, how do you know? And at that moment, I was like, fuck, I don't. And then two, I've got to reassure this kid, because I looked at the law and I looked at the way things work. And I told her with no reservation, I told her, if those people come here, they're going to have to go through me first. And she lit up because she believed what I was saying. And I believed what I was saying because I was so pissed off at other people who supported this law, because all it involved was going and grabbing people that looked brown. That's really all. The probable cause was, if we think that you're illegal, we're going to pick you up. So what this young lady did was, in order to basically get around having to deal with this shit, she got married. She got married quickly. Like, she got married, I think probably 2 or 3 weeks after she and I had that conversation.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of those things of like, I've got a kid, because she had just had a kid. So I have a kid here. I married my kid's father. I'm not going anywhere. And so she came back and told me, she's like, oh, Mr. G, I got married over the weekend, blah, blah, blah. I said, good. And I gave her my information. I said, if you need something, let me know. And I'd never thought about the fear that an immigrant would have, documented or undocumented, because SB 770 didn't protect, documented immigrants. It was anybody that they felt like picking up. That fear compounded with, who are you going to go to? Let's say, Adela and Juan run into some trouble. Who the hell are they going to go to? They can't go to the police. They can't go to the sheriff. They can't go to, a lot of local figures of authority if they get robbed, they get attacked, she gets sexually assaulted, any of those things. You get cheated out of wages at your job, which is a very common thing. There's no one that you can go to for safety. And I know somebody's probably listening, well, when you stay in your country, it's like, no, then you need to shut the fuck up, because these people should have the ability to not be afraid. One, because of what U.S. foreign policy has done in a lot of the countries, which then forces them economically, politically, or socially to come to the United States. And part of Adela and especially Adela's background, they were fighting the cartels. They were fighting the fucking drug cartels, but things got so bad that they had to leave because it was a danger now to them. And I hate to let people know this in on this secret, but it's a lot of Americans that are buying drugs from Mexico, Central America, and South America. And if people here weren't buying that shit, giving the cartel so much fucking power to do what they want to in a lot of these areas by having the money to bribe people to support political candidates that look the other way, or have all types of deals with any number of unsavory people around the world. I'm sorry, I went a little further on that one than I planned, but I just hate the whole, you should stay there and try and make it better. Like, she was trying to make it, things got way fucking dangerous. And again, I mean, this is again one of those things I look at in a film like this, and I'm glad that they went this angle with including immigrants to show that part as well. I mean, they didn't get too deep into it. They gave you some information about them, and you put two and two together and realize, like, shit must have been really bad, especially when the first thing she does in that shelter area when she goes up on the roof is she grabs a rifle, because she's like, no, fuck it, I'm going to fight back too. And you realize this is not like in the second film where it's the couple, the young couple that, get stranded during Purge Day or Purge Night. And they just have to pick up a gun finally to help fight back. She's ready from the beginning. Like, I'm going to shoot whoever I need to shoot to survive.
So
this, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, to kind of spin off of that, an aspect of the film that we haven't touched on is that Canada and Mexico open their borders.
Yes.
to be sanctuaries for the poor Americans who are trying to get out of their dangerous situations.
Yes.
And is that, I mean, it definitely is a direct commentary on America's lack of ability or history with doing that. I mean, I don't know, this might be apocryphal, back where I'm from in Indiana, there were stories that a lot of the factories around us for the RV industry and a lot of the farms would actually put signs up in Mexico and had ads in Mexico saying, come here to work.
Yeah.
Because they wanted cheap labor. And, we report that we are this, particular, the streets are paved with gold and you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make something of yourself in America. And I guess it is the same as the song from West Side Story, where half of them are singing about how great it is and half of them are singing about how shitty it is. But what about that aspect? I think that definitely rubbed my buddy Joe the wrong way. He got a good laugh out of it, at least, that not only do they open themselves up to be a sanctuary, they call the Americans dreamers who then immigrate, under force to their country. I thought that was interesting and probably one of the funnier kind of details in the movie.
Yeah, my entire theater laughed at that. Like, there were maybe only 10 or 12 of us, but every single person in there laughed at Dreamers. They're all just like, oh, man,
Yeah.
This leads into one of my biggest problems with the film, which I'll get to in a bit. But I feel like I love that they open the borders. It's almost a little too spot on again for me. Like, I think it would be better if you had to get in when they're closed, because that's the journey everyone else makes.
Right.
And that's nitpicky, I suppose. Like, I like that it makes barriers. Like, they can't get the truck through because there's so many other people. I like how many people there are. I like that you can assume some of these cars aren't going to move because people jumped out and ran up, right? That's what I would do. I'm not fucking sitting in traffic for the next 3 hours hoping the purge doesn't end. Or, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, the borders don't close in time. Like, I'm not going to take that fucking chance. I'm going through. So for me, as much as I enjoyed the humor of opening the borders, I think narratively it would be a lot stronger if they had to fight to get in.
Well, yeah, and here's the problem I have with the border thing. I myself chuckled. There were probably like 10 or 15 people in the theater, and horror movies, for a lot of time for me, it's comedy because of the irony that gets represented, or sometimes the things that get brought up. But two problems I have with that. Well, one, the border to Mexico, and maybe this is just a movie thing. The borders to Mexico, the border entries, the U.S. side to the Mexican side, are always fucking open. It's the other way around where, it's harder to get in. But then the other thing that I thought about when I started seeing those long lines of people, I'm like, wouldn't that be a big target if you happen to be one of these forever purgers? Just fucking go through and mow down everybody.
Thank you. That's what I was expecting, and I was looking forward to that scene.
Oh, I thought there were going to be bombs going off, just going to be a turkey shoot. Like, I was expecting so much. I'm glad they didn't. Part of me is glad they didn't go, because then I'm kind of like, okay, well, I was robbed of that, but I didn't necessarily need it to drive home how shitty these people are that are forever purgers.
I would have still enjoyed it.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I do think that this is more of an action film than a horror film. Mm-hmm. I think James, maybe you said something about it earlier about the specificity of horror, like it requires that. And I think that early on, when what is our lead lady's name? Adela.
Yeah, Adela.
When she gets trapped, the moment that you see in the trailer, when she gets trapped in the goat trap, that's horror. That's right. Something that's specific that's happening to one person. And most of this turns into kind of action adventure. It's kind of like, hey, it's a good time and we're along for the ride, more than a horror film. Have the other ones in the series, has this been a trend, or have they balanced that line the whole time? I'm kind of interested in that.
There's been, it's almost seemed like they've been, for the most part, majority action 2 through 4. Mm-hmm. This one, I think they started to go back to where it was in the first one, where you had a lot of horror and you had action. But the first one is a lot more horror than action, right? Because the psychological elements. This one, the Forever Purge, I feel as though they've hit the right spots as far as going back into horror without relying on so much action in those horror parts. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was better balanced.
Okay.
So my response would be
than 2 through 4.
My response would be that horror is an emotion. And that's why I believe that horror can be in almost anything. At cons, I say that rom-coms have horror because without the terror of being alone, they mean nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's all about that emotion and what it means to you. And that's what horror is to me. And so when we have the ranch at the beginning, it feels more horror because we get the emotions of the people and we get the consequences and the stakes for these people. And when we go what I call Michael Bay insanity action, I don't care about anyone. Right. I don't know their emotions. There's just shit blowing up. It means nothing to me. There's no stakes. There's no odds. There's no caring. And that's where it's pure action. And that means nothing to me. That's why I hate action films. And we lose that connection to individuals. The horror in those scenes is like when Kristi Noem shows up with her man, and okay, so it's Mother. Mother shows up with her man, and they do the we're gonna shoot the Mexicans, and if the white people want to live, all you got to do is shoot them, and you can join us. That becomes horror again because it's individuals and emotion, and we know the stakes, and we know there's a good shot. We know Juan's probably not going to die, but at the same time, it's the Purge. He might. You know, and then when the other one gets shot, my entire theater was like, "Oh shit!" You know, and that's that investment and that emotional investment, and that's the difference between horror and action for me, and that's why I don't care about everything blowing up as much as I want to see the scene where we would slaughter everybody at the border. That wouldn't be horror to me. That would be almost a war movie, you know?
Right.
So yeah, so that's my answer to you. I feel like most of the movies did this. They had the horror moments and the action moments. I would argue my favorite election year is way more of an action film than a horror film.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I feel like Don said, this one's more balanced. It's still not quite there for me for what I personally want, but I totally get why it works for others.
So you brought up, I don't remember the actress's name, but Mother and Daddy, or Alpha,
yes,
as he's a character who's brought in late to kind of be our figurehead for the bad guys, to give them a specific person that is hunting them.
And give him a reason to do so. Yes.
Right. And did he need another personal reason? Like, his ethos is already that he's going to kill all the brown people. He didn't need an extra thing on top of it, although it doesn't hurt. But it was kind of weird to me that they split the difference and they give him, he's got a personal vendetta against these specific brown people as well. And also, Josh Lucas's character now, and his family. But was that a case of bringing in that character too late, introducing that kind of idea that there is a main bad guy? Because it comes really like right before the third act, basically.
Yep. Okay, so from a writing point of view, this is why I hate this. I absolutely hate everything to do with this.
Okay.
I will constantly say that she looks like the governor of South Dakota, and that I personally believe that was a choice. Anyway, calling her mother, very on the nose. Yes. I would like to point that out. But here's what I hate about it. It gives an identity to the threat. And the Purge in general, but also being an immigrant here, the threat doesn't have a face.
Right.
The threat is everywhere. And the threat cannot be defeated, which is the important part here. And Alpha gives it a face, gives it a way to be defeated, gives them a way to win. More importantly, it makes him semi-sympathetic in a way. Who wouldn't want revenge when your wife is killed? Don't do that. Make them just want to hunt brown people. Put other people out there who just want to hunt brown people. That's the fucking threat, man.
You see Chiago like several times talking to the media and talking about why the Purge is bad, right? You see him doing interviews. I would have loved to have seen somebody on their phone or on YouTube or whatever, seeing Alpha talking, like maybe he was a minister or some shit, and he's talking about we need to purify the land and we need to make America for Americans. Like where you see that you get hints of him from the beginning. Maybe he was in one of those trucks that showed up outside the facility where Adela and Juan were camped out. Maybe he was in that truck. Maybe that was him on the loudspeaker. But I think if you're going to have a face on him, yeah, you're right, Josh. You don't need to. It's too late at this point, or it's too late in this film for us to really give a shit about having a villain that we can put a face to. And yeah, I didn't need to see him like weeping over mother's dead body, because that again becomes one of those things that we do with a lot of villains, and we try and argue like, well, if only his mom had hugged him more, he would have been a good guy. Or, he lost his brother when he was a little kid. That's why he ended up killing, X million people, or whatever nonsensical shit that people give to, say that it was okay for somebody to do something really bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's very good people on both sides. That's what we learned here today.
Damn it, James.
They do bust out the bad hombres term, too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We got us a couple bad hombres here. I think that you could have emasculated him instead, like let them get away. And that thing that he thinks he has as control would have been a better motivator here. But again, I still think this is a huge misstep and they shouldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, this is the point where Dylan Tucker has his redemption arc because he doesn't take the easy way out for the first time in his life. I get it. I hate it so much, but I don't like Dylan Tucker. So I have an issue with this because I feel like all this does is loudly say, you're one of the good ones, Juan.
Yes.
Right.
That means nothing to me. It's not a redemption arc. Either people are doing something for him or they're one of the good ones. Dylan learns nothing. I don't like this. And the fact that he gets to First Nations land and then he takes over the battle, I hate this. I hate that the white cowboy became the leader of everything. I want to see Dylan Tucker carry his fucking pregnant wife up this goddamn mountain and make the journey that he's thought was so fucking easy for all these lazy people. I want to see him get up there and have to like break a wild horse to get his wife where she's going. I want to see Dylan literally deliver the fucking baby in the middle of the land with nothing around. Yeah. That's the redemption arc. Mm-hmm. Dylan Tucker gets to go wild cowboy and shoot things. Fuck you. There, that's my rant.
Well, the thing is, I think that would have worked if this was a Dylan Tucker centric story.
Dylan Tucker should have died.
I think Jesus. Dylan Tucker versus the forces.
I'm now calling this Purge, but Dylan Tucker must die.
But I think if this had been just about him, it's on the farm. There's no Juan. There's no Adela. That they're not as big of characters as they are in the film. If it's him and it's like, oh shit, we got to get. Then I would 100% agree with you. I think not having the horse, because that was one of the texts I sent you. I was like, why are you picking a big rig and then driving it into the city and you're just becoming a bigger target every place you go? Should have found some other mode of conveyance at some point. But yeah, I think him having to walk to the border with his wife, whether he's carrying her or not, or pushing her in a wheelbarrow or something, right? It should have been a lot harder for him than what they had like a zip line set up, which I thought was awesome. It was fucking awesome just to have the motorized zip line. Yeah. Which definitely made things a whole lot easier.
But he gets to stay there and play hero while everyone else does the hard work. That's what I hate about it.
But
I don't like it.
But I mean, after being emasculated in his own mind earlier in the film, I can kind of understand why he feels the need to take charge. So it's kind of like proving him, quote unquote, proving himself as a man. And the reassurance that he's given by the other migrant saying like, "Oh no, don't worry, we got her. We'll get her to safety."
Like white boy's gonna die.
Well, yeah, it's like the pulling out the picture of your girlfriend or wife in a war movie. I'm like, oh, Dylan's probably not going to make it. I'm glad this didn't happen because this became still a trope in a lot of cases. I was glad that it didn't become one of these things where Dylan is saved by Juan or saved by Adela, and they sacrifice themselves to save him.
Oh, I absolutely expected that.
Oh, you got a baby to live for. Your wife is waiting for you. Some shit like that. I'm so glad.
We named the baby Adela.
Yeah. I was worried that's where they were going to go. I'm just glad they didn't kill Ana de la Reguera.
All right, here's my final thing about Dylan, and then I'll let it go.
No, it's not your last one.
It's not. It's never going to end. I'll be talking about this for the next 5 years. But I get his need to be in control, and I get why he would want to be in control. I hate that they all accept it. It's not his land. It's not his country. He's literally on First Nations land, so he's in neither one. And his role here to any rational human being would be go take care of your wife. And instead, they all go, oh, white cowboy, please tell us what to do. What the fuck? That's my issue with it. Narratively, it makes no fucking sense to me.
It makes sense for an action movie, though.
Okay, but action movies don't make any fucking sense.
No, that's what I'm saying. It makes sense as far as with action movies and with westerns. That makes sense as far as this whole idea of I'm gonna stay back with all these guys to prevent the people that are chasing us from catching up to you.
Sure, but I'm saying from a narrative point of view, Juan should be in charge. Adela should be in charge.
Well, Juan, Adela, or Chiaga should any one of them should be in charge because
Chiaga because he seems like a pacifist, or at least not a total pacifist, but I'm saying more so. Adela is set up the whole fucking time to be the person that takes charge here. And if Dylan had to get his wife to Mexico and make this hard journey and do the birth thing in the middle of the field, like I said, and Adela was the one providing cover the whole fucking time, that's your theme of the whole fucking movie. That's literally where every narrative thread has led, and instead we get this wild ass ending that doesn't fit with anything.
Well, and I will push back a little bit on your seeming distaste for action movies.
You're fired. No, go ahead.
Arguably, the best action movie of all time is Die Hard. It's up there at least.
Okay.
And you have a moment where John McClane is broken, where he thinks he's going to die, and he tells Reginald Vaughn Johnson, like, tell my wife I love her. I'm sorry. He all of this kind of emotional moment comes through when he has been humbled and he thinks he's going to bite it. That's what Dylan needs. We don't get to see a moment where he is humbled. He gets to be the white savior kind of the whole time. And it's just, he changes his mind like a couple degrees, apparently. Yep. And then he is accepted into Mexico, and they're already setting up camps, aid camps for white people. His life is so easy, and it shouldn't be.
Well, I laughed at that part, and I can't remember if I said this in the theater. I think I wrote it in my notes. It was like, I bet those Spanish lessons would have come in handy now, huh, fucker? Because like, hospital, medico.
Right.
I'm like, really, dude? Oh my gosh. Yeah, but
right.
Chiago is I love his character. I didn't need everything to be told to me about who he is and what he is, and I'm glad they didn't go with the noble savage or the I forgot what the mystical native, all those different things, where I'm glad they didn't go to this route where he's like, oh, I'm going to burn this and it'll serve as protection for us. And, whatever. They give us enough of him and his backstory in those interviews. And then when Lupita like contacts him to get them, she was a lady in El Paso, contacts him to get them across the border. That whole idea of, when I think Dylan confronted him about something, and he basically said, we've been fighting this fight for 500 years.
Right.
And with the shitty indigenous history instruction that we have in this country overall, because, there's so little that is taught about indigenous people, indigenous history, indigenous culture, that just by those words of we've been fighting this fight for 500 years, that should immediately spark somebody to say, like, I need to learn more about this group, or, whatever group happens to be near me, and understand what took place and why those words that he said are so significant. And those words, I mean, it's a short sentence, it's a short piece of the film, but it's so powerful in getting to the point of, for indigenous people, for marginalized people, the purge is just another day that ends in Y. Right. It's not something that, we need 12 hours, which again, I always look at the 12 hours. I'm like, why the fuck is it 12 hours? Why not 24? Did they get to this point where it's like, we should just give them half a day instead of a full day? But
because it's at night and rich people want to just sleep through it.
You just have like a time, have like a half time, give yourselves a 2-hour break. So it goes for, 10 hours, and then you'd have to break it up again. But even then, you've got to think about not just the Indian wars themselves, the genocide against Native Americans themselves, the fact that they were not citizens or not recognized as citizens until the 20th century, the fact that we had a football team or several sports teams that were named after indigenous people, as this idea that some people argued it was a compliment, it was meant to honor them. I've met members of the American Indian movement, and they all say the same thing. That's not a fucking compliment, and it's not a fucking honor. When it comes to representation in media, and how they're presented in film and in television historically, how they're represented in literature, and even more recently, for those of you who are listening to this in the first full week of July, the discovery of thousands of bodies, mainly of children, that are near the residential schools, the boarding schools, where indigenous people were basically kidnapped and put into these schools to become quote unquote civilized. And this is stuff that went up through, in some cases still going on. But some of the bodies that they're finding are from the 90s, from the 1990s, not the 1890s. So when he said, we've been fighting this fight for 500 years, all I thought about was all the shit that indigenous people on this continent had to deal with and are still dealing with, even when it comes to things like resources, accessing water, accessing grocery stores on the reservations. And then when they bring up valid concerns, someone makes a comment like, well, you guys have casinos, or you guys don't pay taxes, or you guys get to go to school, or you guys get to do whatever thing that they think that they know about indigenous people. Or you have people like a former elected official saying things like, well, I don't want them to have casinos because these guys don't look like real Indians, or, having their culture degraded, and they're having their identity questioned or invalidated.
No, that was pretty good. It gave me too much to think about to actually respond.
And like I said, I wrote down the line because I was like, this is a powerful part of the film that's probably not going to get, because of so much that's already been discussed and so much stuff that's been brought up, it's probably not going to hit everybody until you probably watch it maybe the second or third time. But it stood out to me because it's one of the areas that I try to focus in on.
I think the discovery of those bodies recently definitely flavored that for me, and kind of that whole storyline. I mean, it couldn't help but be top of mind when thinking about the indigenous people and what they've gone through, what they've been subjected to. and how that flavors how they view everything and how they are viewed in everything.
Do you mind if I jump to the part of the film I hate the most?
Go ahead, man.
The end of the film pisses me off like nothing else. I will accept Dylan Tucker's super savior. I will accept action scenes that I don't care about. The idea that the good guys banded together and put an end to the forever purge? No, not at all. No. I hate this ending so fucking much. I hate that they're like, oh, people are fighting back and this is happening. No, I don't believe that at all, because I've sat here for the last however many months and I've seen a lot of keyboard warriors and I've seen a lot of people willing to donate to a senator who might do something. And I've seen no action. I haven't seen America coming together. And I don't think that we should. I think there are things that we can't agree on, and there are lines we cannot cross to work with people. And I think that that's different for everybody. So while you think I'm talking about the extremists, I'm talking about everyday people as well, because some people have lines they're willing to cross that I'm not, and I can't work with them. And some people have whatever else, like whatever beliefs, they're not the same. And we cannot all come together and stop the forever purge in a day and a half.
Well, to pick up from where you are, the most annoying thing for me last year, and this is the most annoying thing for me last year, was the day after the election, or 2 days after, when it was finally called. Like, basically CNN and MSNBC News were waiting for Fox News to call it. They're like, come on, we want you to say that Trump lost. We want you to say that Trump lost. So we're going to give you the honor of doing it first, because we know he's watching you. But all these people I know of, worked with, went to school with, went to college with, who I know that they voted for Trump either because they said they did or because of the way they conducted themselves, went on this posting spree of, now the election is over, I hope we can all come together. I'm like, no, fuck you. Your guy lost, okay? If he had won, you would have been saying all these things about BLM and trans people and gay people and any number of groups that you don't care about, saying that they're the thing that's bringing America down. This is what's so horrible. And then I saw these same people who were pissed off about a Walgreens or a Target or whatever burning, had nothing to say when people of their political ideology, political spectrum, were storming the U.S. Capitol. So for me, I was kind of like, I don't believe in this coming together stuff. I am not going to become friends with a neo-Confederate. I'm not going to become friends with a neo-Nazi. I'm not going to become friends with TERFs, any of that stuff, because I believe that they're not moving that far for me to meet them in the middle. It becomes me walking 2 steps forward and they take 3 steps back and say, you still need to meet me in the middle. I'm with you 100%, James. I do not see the ending as believable, with everyone immediately coming together to fight the anti-purgers, or I'm sorry, to fight the forever purgers and become anti-purgers, which it sounds weird. And I don't think it's because the military got attacked.
We call them anti-poo, just so you know.
Anti-poo.
Nicely done.
Because, the military gets attacked and you see how the NFFA pulls them back and like, oh, they're withdrawing from El Paso. They're withdrawing from all these cities because they've taken severe losses. That would not get a lot of people out in the streets and say like, oh my gosh, you guys attacked the military. Oh my gosh, you guys attacked the police. We should have an investigation. Oh, never mind. I forgot they don't do that shit either. Because we've seen in the past 6-7 months how unbelievable that part of the film would be in reality. Because when we have people who are in power to make the right decisions or to do the right thing, we see that they don't. And I'll be honest, myself, if this were somebody of my own party, or if this were someone that I was politically affiliated with, and I saw them climbing the Capitol steps or threatening murder or whatever it is, I'm fucking turning you in. Because at that point, you have crossed that line I'm not willing to cross, which is, politically motivated physical violence. But when you're talking about the safety and security of millions of people and the safety and security of the continuance of a democracy or representative democracy, I don't think you being buddies with a guy who threatened that is going to make things better. I don't think that being friends with them is more important than bringing people to justice or bringing them in front of a tribunal, in front of a jury, in order to answer for their crimes or their alleged crimes.
Sure. My point, though, wasn't being friends with them. My point was people like me can't band together and do this. We just can't. And we definitely can't do it in a day and a half. We don't have the social media banding everyone together for months like the other side did. We can't agree on anything. There's no fucking way. And on top of that, people like me don't want to go fight. Like I'm going to be the last person that would ever grab a gun and go fight this. We're not fighting these people. This ending makes no fucking sense to me. And I refuse to believe that we could get along long enough on social media to discuss anything, let alone band together and go stop these guys.
I think this would have worked. I mean, that ending would have worked if you're talking about, I would say pre-21st century, pre-9/11. Let's go there. Because you had communities that were attacked. So you got, I think this past week was the anniversary of the East St. Louis race massacre or race riots. You had Detroit riots, an uprising. You've had Tulsa. So you have these moments where a group is attacked and people do fight back, or you have a group that is attacked and the federal government gets involved. It's happened before, but I think if it becomes something that's as widespread as this is a nationwide thing, nationally, this is going on. I think in pockets, you would see people fighting back. So if we say like Oakland or Portland, Atlanta,
sure.
A lot of places where you've got a very diverse group of people that all deal with each other, right? I think if people came in from the outside, like, oh, we're going to purge you motherfuckers, you're going to see a lot of people in Atlanta who normally wouldn't have gotten along working together or whatever, fighting back. Or, I mean, even if you use something as so absurd as Independence Day, the movie, you had all these people that were all of a sudden now coming together, putting their differences aside to go fight the aliens because the aliens came down and, wrecked shit. I see it as if someone is recognized as an outsider or someone is recognized as they're so big of a threat that our differences that we have don't matter anymore. I think it's possible, but I think the way that social media has done, because you won't even have to get organized on social media. If it becomes one of these things of you see some of your neighbors going down the street, neighbors you don't talk to anymore. You see your neighbors going down the street and like, hey, these coming in from out of town. They're trying to kill everybody. We need to fight them back. At first you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? And then you would realize like, oh shit, I need to do something. If that's help set up triage or bring water or something, it might not even be fighting. It might just be, I don't know. It could be any number of things, because you've seen this at various protests where people have gone, they've marched, they've made a lot of noise, but then you also have people that hang back with, I'm water people, I'll give you a place to lie down. We've got medical facilities in case anybody passes out, or the police come in here in riot gear and do whatever. I think it's possible, but I don't think it would happen. I think it would happen small scale, not nationwide, like the film presents.
Well, and that's my point. I don't think that it stops. And the film, we just defeated the bad guys and it's over. And that's fucked up. Josh, do you have anything to add about the end of the film?
I hope that we live in the world that Don posited, but I'm afraid that we live in James's. That's where I'm at.
I agree. I know that we live in James's. So my final complaint about this is one shot, and I get it, but God, it just ground me the wrong way.
Oh, God,
it's my boy Dylan Tucker standing on the literal line between the two countries, looking down at it. Number one, how did you find this little tiny plaque to stand here and take this picture? Number two, this is First Nation land. It is not the U.S. or Mexico. Go fuck yourself. This line doesn't exist. There's a line between the U.S. and First Nation, and there's a line between First Nation and Mexico. This spot does not exist. No, where they are. They are, it does not exist.
It could.
No, it doesn't.
Because remember,
First Nation land.
Because remember, Chiago says the border split us. I'm sorry, the wall split us. So there is a recognition, and this is the way that the borders tend to work in those areas. The borders stop once they. The walls stop once they get to First Peoples or First Nations land. Right, the markers would still exist. Posts would still exist, but there would be no wall. Because
why would they exist? That's not where the line is. That's not either of their land. Because
the side of the indigenous the indigenous land that is on, well, all the land is indigenous. The reservation land that would be on the Mexican side would have a relationship with Mexico. And I'm not saying that they're under Mexican control or anything like that. And then the side that's on the U.S. side would have its relationship with the United States federal government, with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And have
all that. I'm asking you who owns
and have
the
their
land.
federal protection. You really want to go there?
I already did. You're the one trying to defend it.
Let me just say this. At the American Indian Museum, there is an entire display called broken paper or bad paper. And it's all the broken treaties that the United States has with indigenous peoples. So I'm going to say this to be safe. It is the indigenous people's land, but the federal government dictates much of the policy that takes place on it.
And I'm going to say that James DeMonico has never been to First Nation land on the border.
But
if I'm wrong, DeMonico, I'm sorry.
But it is, and I'm going to disagree with you about using it. It is a good thing to include, because for somebody like me, I could look at it and laugh at Dylan Tucker, because I'm sorry, it's that whole thing of people who pride themselves on never leaving their town or never leaving their state are missing out on so many things. And he strikes me as the kind of guy that has never left Texas, despite having the 18-wheeler. I see the 18-wheeler as going around Texas, which Texas is a very big, I'm sorry for people in Texas, it's a republic, it's a state. Texas is a very big landmass. I could see him just driving that 18-wheeler to rodeos or to stock shows or stock sales and things like that, and never leaving Texas, other than maybe going across the border to Louisiana or maybe to Oklahoma. But I don't see him as the guy who, when they get to El Paso, is like, oh yeah, this is the same route I would take when I was going to Tucson or when I was going to, wherever in New Mexico. But I think that's a really good shot, because it makes you think about, one, by comparison, how easy his trek was. He gets 50 feet from the marker, and there are tents and triage units, medical facilities set up. Like, he just looks down and it's within eye shot. And it's not even from a distance. It's like, oh, I could just halfway jog down this hill to find the hospital. The Medico.
I hate everything about it. All right, Josh, what do you got? Anything else?
I have to agree with you. I do think that that plaque, that little marker, does not exist. Not where it is purported to be within the movie.
Well, that's different. That's different. I will. Yeah. I will agree with that.
Okay.
And when you're talking about the ending and not liking the ending, I like the ending for different I mean, I dislike the idea of it's so easy, like everybody starts fighting back. But I like the ending because I don't think it is, especially the way that news gets reported. I don't see it as people are fighting against the purgers. I see it as the purge is just continuing. So it's not even a thing of, hey, we want to stop these guys, because that would, again, probably be just the way the media is reporting it. I see it as people are now realizing that no day is safe. So I could honestly see a continuation of this film where it actually is the forever purge or the endless purge or whatever, because the government has stepped back in the responsibility. And I say that because I could see, and I could argue this film is another iteration of Frankenstein, where the NFFA are Dr. Frankenstein. The monster that they've created is now out of control. They can't do anything about it. They thought it was for a good purpose. They thought they could use it for, a means to an end. And they realized that they cannot control the monster that they've created.
But the ending says it's defeated.
No, it's not.
That's what they say. But the ending that we're presented with is that it's over.
No.
And that doesn't make sense. That's what I hate. And they say that we've banded together, we've put a stop to this, and they're going home. They're being defeated right now. That's the ending we're presented with.
Yeah, but it's the same thing when you say, let's say when people would argue like, oh, the Klan got defeated, or the Klan did. I can't remember if it was Josh or you who made the comment about, you're seeing the people behind the masks. I see these forever purger people are going to retool and figure out, because it's not over. They're going to figure out a way to get what they want. They might not have been able to get it through purging, but they're going to find another way, like, I don't know, getting into elected office.
I liked the part where Adela won the lottery. I'm sorry. I thought we were making up our own endings.
You know what, damn it. This is the end of the show. We will not record anymore because I hate James now.
Sounds great to me. Goodbye, everybody.
As long as everyone is getting their final gripes out, from a filmmaking standpoint, there was a lot of the action in this movie that was just way too sloppy for my taste.
Yes.
And especially towards the end when they're in the little hut, and somehow the hut has 2 rooms, which is impressive.
Yeah, I thought that was strange.
I thought that was kind of cool. Like, hey, we're going to break up the action. But the size of those rooms seems to change in between shots, depending on what's needed. Like when the motorcycle comes in, it's huge, and then it's super dangerous and close, and it just didn't make sense. A lot of the action out in the streets, you can't tell, which is part of the point. You can't tell who's the purgers and who's the soldiers and who's just caught in the middle. But I really wanted to see like a better grasp on the visuals in those action scenes. It's one of those things that helps ground you in an action movie, is if somebody has a really good idea of the geography of what's happening. And I don't think it's this guy's strong suit, or maybe he hasn't done enough. This is his first feature. So I don't know why they didn't hand it off to like a second unit director who specialized in that necessarily, but it seems like it was really kind of sloppily put together, and I wish that would have been better.
I feel like that happens in a lot of the Purge movies. Like they're trying to convey the insanity of what's happening, and instead it just becomes a mess that I don't care about.
Josh, you're the guest. It's you get first go if you would like.
Yes, good, because I have some and I didn't want anybody to steal them.
That's what James does.
Okay. I decided to take a page out of Don's book. From what I've heard in the past, he can sometimes bring a little laundry list of recommendations. And you have me, when I listen to shows like this, I'm in my Letterboxd queue, hitting watch list, adding stuff to it.
Nice.
And I was listening to your episode on Spontaneous the other day, and Don, I think you had what I would call a metric fuck ton of recommendations.
That's every week. That's every episode. Yeah.
And I did. I wore out my thumb adding shit to my queue. So this is not quite as exhaustive, but I broke them down into a couple different sections. The first ones that came to mind because of the home invasion that I was expecting we were going to get was The Strangers and The Collector and The Collection. Those movies.
Okay.
Those especially put me in mind of the first one. Another one that people might have missed out on because it came out during the pandemic is Becky, which I thought was a really fun.
We love Becky.
Okay, yeah. Good home invasion movie. And there's a couple that turn the idea on its head a little bit with Don't Breathe and You're Next. You get kind of recontextualization of home invasions. A personal favorite that I think is kind of special, and it took me a couple times to get into it, but here's Mike Flanagan's Hush. I'm kind of become a big Flanagan head over the last couple of years, watching all of his movies multiple times. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a unique setup. If you don't know, it's a deaf woman who is the victim of the home invasion. And it's just the way that he plays with the camera and sound design in the movie, I think is really well done. And then my extreme foreign section is Martyrs, Funny Games, and the German movie Angst, which is up there with Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, as far as makes me queasy, but I've watched it a couple times and I'm kind of surprised, but it's good enough that it draws me back in. So
very nice. All right. I only have 4, Don. Are you ready?
All right. Let me go ahead and cross them off because I know you stole them from me.
All right. Here we go. The Purge, Purge Anarchy, Purge Election Year, The First Purge. Your turn.
Oh, man.
Somebody had to fucking do it. Come on.
There we go. All right, I wrote down any of the other Purge films.
He legitimately took the 3 I was going to do, so I couldn't resist that.
That was good.
All right, so I've recommended this film before. It's Doomsday. I keep trying to get James to watch it. Somebody will probably come on and request it, so he'll finally get to see it. Dawn of the Dead.
Trying to get people to do so.
Yeah, of course. Terminator 1 and 2, or Terminator 1 or 2. We already mentioned The Hunt on the show, so I don't need to mention them again. Seven Samurai, or any of the copies of it, which would be things like Magnificent Seven, if you like westerns or anything like that. A Quiet Place, Mad Max Fury Road, Belko Experiment. I'm surprised James didn't mention that one. Truth or Dare. And here's one I'm going to steal something from James. Saw.
Never heard of it.
Another one James loves, Bird Box. Let's see. Let's see. The Hitcher. The original or the remake. The Final Destination series. And because I think Tenoch Huerta, the actor who plays Juan, is going to start getting a lot more known in the United States, I would recommend Narcos Mexico. He has a major role on that series, and he kind of like he does in this film, where he does a masterful job playing his character. He does the same thing in this film, to the point where I didn't recognize him until I got home and thought about who he was. It's outstanding. And then for Ana de la Reguera, pretty much anything, because I will watch anything she is in.
Cool.
My wife knows, so.
I've got to bring one more because your Mad Max recommendation brought it to mind. And this is to give props to my buddy Joe, who I went and saw The Purge with. There was a 1-season show on Netflix called Daybreak. Post-apocalyptic teen coming of age. It borrows a lot from Mad Max, but in a very comic way. And I've only seen a couple episodes of it at Joe's insistence, and I got to say it is fantastic. It's a lot of fun.
Nice.
I need an excuse to watch that. He kept coming up and was like, all right, I'll watch it.
So I guess that brings us to the part where you can tell everybody how to find you on social media and anything else you want to push one last time.
Okay. You can find me. I'm on Twitter at Spartacus, Spartickes. It's a pun on my last name if you don't get it. I'm at josh.ickes on Instagram. I also have channels for Nashville, CA, which is the podcast I host with my buddy Sean Perry, known as Sean of the Bread because he's a fantastic baker. He's a multi-dimensional dude who brings it in several categories. So I would love people to check that show out. And go find the trailer for the reenactment. I know we have a Facebook page and all that good stuff for it. Like I said, Tony Todd's in the movie. It's a lot of fun, and we put a lot of hard work into it with me and some buddies who've been kind of striving to make a feature for the last 8 or 10 years together. So getting to do it was definitely a culmination for a lot of us.
Awesome. So, Josh, sincerely, thank you for being on the episode. Yes. And you brought some very interesting things I hadn't considered. And you let me fight with Don, which is my favorite activity. So I've had a great time with you today.
As a fan, you guys fighting is one of my favorite things to hear. So I'm here for it.
See, it's all Don, one-sided, though.
Don, thank you for being here as well.
Love you.
I love you. Don't take him away. I love him. All right. So we will wrap this up for this week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronoma.com.